Well, good morning. Thanks for getting here on short order. I think many are aware that we've had several recent attacks in the downtown area targeting women. The good news is that we've made an arrest this week that we think will clear several of these cases. And Chief Mike Koval is going to give you the information that we can share at this time. Chief?
Thanks, Joel. Thank you for joining us all on short notice. As you know, Madison has a pretty good reputation in terms of a safe community, a community where crime is comparably relative to other people our size and strength is not something extraordinary, which we're very proud to proclaim and to brag about and to continue to work for. Yet every now and again, we do have these episodic crime sprees, which certainly put us all on a sort of perilous course or path because we're concerned about what the trajectory is until we can conclude it. So as Joel mentioned, I'm pleased that we have an opportunity to report back to our constituents that today we have someone under arrest and will be subsequently charged with a number of offenses. We have him currently for at least 4 different instances down here in the Isthmus area, dating back to a week from last Tuesday. I'll sort of describe those in sort of a flip-flop chronology because there's events here that I think are noteworthy. First and foremost, I think that as you all understand, community policing is at its best when it's done in partnership, when it's done in collaboration. And certainly that was the case here with a lot of people from our downtown not-for-profits and elsewhere who deal with the same populations of people that we are constantly overlapping with and sharing concerns, needs, and challenges with. But I'll tell you, this time when we looked over the course, and I think many of you subscribed to the blog, when you have an incident of a predatory nature where you're preying upon vulnerable victims, and then you see that pattern is escalating by leaps and by bounds, that is that instance where we sort of close ranks, despite what your assignments or duties might be, and we all go on board and throw everything we have at it. And such was the instance of what led to this arrest. What ultimately was our success? Well, first of all, it's always amazing to me to see victims who have the capacity and the resiliency to provide us with some incredible victim statements of specificity, of detail, to be able to describe their assailant with that sense of certainty really helps us in terms of the investigative element of this whole thing. So we had great witnesses. The other thing is that one of the people who was victimized on a bus, and we'll talk about that, was a 13-year-old girl last Sunday. And she had an 11-year-old schoolmate who I really want to single out for individual accolades because she had listened well to a parent, and the parent had told her, you know, when you engage or interact with people that give you that sort of creepy feeling, take out your cell phone and take a picture of them. And in fact, in the encounter which occurred on this bus, an 11-year-old who had the presence of mind to have that vibe, to have that feeling, and to remember and hearken back to those parental instructions proved to be very instrumental to us. Let's start there, shall we? Because I think that's very helpful. It was a week ago last Sunday, just Sunday, a couple days ago. We had a 13-year-old with a couple of schoolmates traveling from the West Point transfer hub on over to the Central District around 6:30, 7 o'clock Sunday evening. And in that instance, this suspect, who is now our person in custody, did some very crude things, some groping attempts, and had predicated all this behavior by surveillance footage that shows him masturbating the back of the bus. And the girls were obviously concerned, disheveled, taken aback, and it was the 11-year-old as well as the 13-year-old who made a timely report that was given to the MPD, and that really was a springboard for which we could really sink our meat hooks onto something looking at the correlation of connecting the dots over a series of events. As I said, the first event which would have occurred was a week ago last Tuesday. September 17th at around 5:30 a.m. when this suspect first began this crime spree by entering the home of another without consent and with intent to commit a crime therein. Some of you may know that, with intent to commit a crime therein being a burglary. In this case, we think that was for a more nefarious issue of a sexual assault or an attempt. But in that instance, the victim repelled him in terms of wakening, screaming, alerting, and he fled the scene. Then we had, secondarily, the next case in our grand scheme of things would have been on South Patterson Street. That was at 7:50 p.m. in the 400 block. And in that instance, we had someone who was approached from behind, groped, and that was a 4th-degree sexual assault before that victim disengaged and was able to seek help, seek shelter, and call the police. Then we had, as I said, the Metro bus incident, which I began at the top of this report with discussing. And then Sunday evening at around 9:45-ish, as a woman was walking in the 500 block of East Main, she was assaulted, and there was a physical altercation, and ultimately she was able to repel that attack. So through this whole litany of cases, we have under arrest a 26-year-old male whose name is Luis Ruiz Ugalde. I think, again, he is a predator of the worst kind, pernicious because of his escalating behavior and because of his choice of very vulnerable victims. Not only did we have great victim statements, but we had a lot of other things going for us in order to be able to arrive at this conference today. We had the benefit of surveillance cameras yet again, which helped our detectives corroborate modus operandi, proximity, physical descriptions, clothing descriptions. That was infinitely helpful, and as you know, we also have bus cameras that are public places, public spaces, and those Metro bus cameras also proved providential. We had teamwork from a variety of sources from within. Certainly our beat detectives, our detectives who are assigned to a district, were heavy lifters on this one, but they were assisted by our colleagues from the burglary crimes unit, the violent crimes unit. So many of our detectives, investigators come together for these big, critical, sort of serialistic crimes to make sure that we try to put a good conclusion on it as quickly as we can from a community safety standpoint. Additionally, I cannot forget our beat cops, and in particular, our neighborhood beat cops assigned to the downtown area. They know everybody. They know everybody who knows everybody else. They get anonymous information. They get informed information. And I actually think that the beat cops were very critical to us pulling all these together and getting a name with a face and all of this. And then again, as I started at the outset, the collaboration we have with community members who are willing to come forward and assist us, understanding that it's in everybody's benefit to see the area, particularly our downtown area. We get so much of the publicity that they should also get the publicity for when they're working together cooperatively, collaboratively with us and for us, and we're all on the same page. And I think that's a real celebration of what we can do together in a community policing format. So from that standpoint, I will leave you for questions, if I may.
That incident you talked about on Patterson, was that also on September 17th?
No, that was just this last Sunday, I believe. Oh, the one on East Main was Sunday, pardon me. That was on last Friday, the 400 block of Patterson. That was the 20th.
And I'll share these later.
Oh.
For the three of the incidents that the chief is referencing, there are current incident reports on our website. The one case that is not on the website is the 4th-degree sexual assault that the chief just referenced that took place very close to B.B. Clark Beach. So that was last Friday evening.
You want to spell the name of this guy?
Yeah, it's R-U-I-Z with a hyphen, I believe, U-G-A-L-D-E. First name of Luis, L-U-I-S.
He's 26. Is he from Madison, or do you know?
I think he's NPA, no permanent address.
So when you talk about the beat cops and the neighborhood officers being instrumental in this and being able to talk to the folks that they know in the community, is that because the folks in the community knew who this man was? Was he a frequenter of the downtown area that they were able to recognize him?
Well, yes, they recognized him, but I think one of the reasons that they came forward and assisted us is that they've come to trust, to know, and to understand that the neighborhood officers are someone they can trust in a fiduciary sort of way, and that this isn't going to impact or harm their ongoing necessity for relationships with a population that can be very transient at times.
Other questions for the chief? I'm gonna ask this because it was almost 4 years ago this month. There was the bike path assault. Is there any chance so far that you are aware of, this guy could be related to something going back that far, or anything beyond the 4 incidents that you're talking
Well,
about?
in terms of the most immediate sense, when we have crime sprees or episodes like this, we do a lot of information brokering and sharing with the other neighboring law enforcement agencies. And sometimes when you have a format as visible as this is, we will have other victims who may have at this point have been somewhat reluctant to come forward. We don't know that there are other victims that are coming forward. There are some other instances we have looked like that look like they might have a correlation to this, but of course it's that nuisance of probable cause, and if we don't have the evidentiary means to link this individual with other causes or incidents, then we can't charge them. We're comfortable in charging for the 4 incidents we have as of this date. But in terms of that brutal lakeshore path that I do recall too vividly, can't forget it. We're not myopic, we don't get tunnel vision, but at this point there doesn't appear to be a correlation in time and proximity to this same event, series of events in the last week to 10 days.
And the chief, having said that, and talked just briefly with one of our investigators, certainly will take a look at him to see if he could be connected.
Right.
But at this time, we don't have anything that would say that he is.
Right.
The incident for which there is not an incident report, can you give some more details to where exactly, at what time, and what?
Yeah, I'm going to put something once we finish the news conference, I'll put out a release. This was a woman who was walking
From B.B. Clark Beach.
near the area of B.B. Clark Beach. She had someone run up behind her and grab her buttocks. So it's a 4th-degree sexual assault. And that's really the nature of that case. But again, we've been able to connect this suspect to that case, and so he'll be tentatively charged with that 4th-degree sexual assault. Also, I have some literature to distribute to media. I've given Chris Rickert one of the copies now, so you can see what we have arrested this person for currently. He was arrested Monday night by our violent crimes unit in the downtown area and taken into custody specifically for the sexual assault that took place on the Madison Metro bus involving the child. We are now, just this morning, in fact, our detectives have been working at developing probable cause that we'll be referring additional tentative charges to the district attorney. For media interest, it's my understanding, and again, you need to check with the DA's office, but I believe that our suspect will be making his initial appearance at 1:30 this afternoon.
Thank you, Chief. Updated, thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, so when it comes to surveillance cameras, being part of, helping you get a suspect in this case, would you speak to the fact that surveillance cameras are often a necessity in catching suspects like this? I know a lot of places in the downtown area or other places throughout the city don't all have surveillance cameras, so would it be helpful to have them in places that, they could be utilized? I know they're expensive, so it's kind of that aspect of it. You can't put them everywhere, but do you think they should be?
Well, of course, yeah, the greedy chief says, yes, more cameras is always good. The thing is that, yes, we have found that in today's day and age and climate is that if it were not for cameras, but for forensics like DNA and those other tried and true methodologies, we would find a lot of these cases unsolvable because, quite frankly, they're unwitnessed, or if they are witnessed, there's a reluctance of people to come forward either for fear of retaliation, reprisal, the images of being a snitch, whatever the cases may be. There's a lot of reasons that human intelligence factor is less than forthcoming, as much as we'd still like to get that as best we can. But we've been also careful, mindful that with those cameras comes balancing of privacy issues. And so that's why our cameras, the city cameras, are put in portals of public access and direction, and those areas where none of us enjoy a superior right of privacy. We don't put them in private areas. We don't direct them in backyards or in areas where people would have an expectation of those privacy areas. But the cameras have been fundamentally important to us in clearing a lot of our very high-profile cases and even sort of our run-of-the-mill garden variety, quite frankly. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Yes, I have
I-
another question.
I would just follow up with that too. I've talked with some of our detectives, and certainly there are areas of the city where there is not good camera coverage, and it's much harder to solve some of those cases because of that. In areas such as the Langdon Street neighborhood, where we had this break-in on Howard Place, where this individual's been tentatively charged with that burglary, we had exceptional video that really that detectives were able to track his movement in that area. And so it makes a huge difference. As I've referenced before, when I first started here, Kelly Nolan disappeared off State Street. There were no cameras. I firmly believe that had we had cameras on State Street at the time that Kelly Nolan disappeared, we'd be in a much better situation in terms of identifying a suspect and what is still an open case for us.
Can't disagree.
And then my other question was about, can you speak to the importance of identifying suspects that show, signs of escalating crimes, in terms of their sprees? How important is it to identify these suspects before something becomes, extremely critical?
Well, again, and this is a perfect example of a stair step of escalating behavior. First, you get into the house. Then we get into the point where we're actually having physical contact. Now we're having the event where we have the predicate of lewd and lascivious behavior and groping or grappling with minor children, a 13-year-old. And now we've reached the summit where on a Sunday night when someone is walking down a well-lit street area of literally being stalked and then attacked with the intent obviously to do harm in the sense of a sexual assault. So in this case, it was clearly on an escalator in terms of its trajectory. So yes, I'm very happy that the detectives made a timely arrest as they have, because I think that was where the scale was headed.
Is there, I feel like this is a very specific instance, and you had talked at the beginning about how it's not quite as usual for the city of Madison, but is there a learning experience for anybody out of this?
I think the learning experience, it's affirming for us, because we've seen this happen time and time again, but for others who want to witness what community policing means, is that the idea of the cops sort of going it alone, we're the professionals, stand back, amateur hour, we'll handle this. Those are very naive and quite frankly disingenuous. We need to have this as a holistic approach. And quite frankly, as so often is the case with a lot of instances, even in terms of upper state, to assume that the cops in and of themselves can sort of ticket and arrest our ways out of that issue and that environment is absurd. We need to have a lot of people, social service intervention, AODA people, a lot of different things in terms of home and advocates for the homeless. Those things are a consortium, and that's why community policing works best when it's done together, collaboratively. And in this instance, we had that very same sort of essence in looking at making an arrest in a set of insidious crimes.
Speaking as a woman, I just feel, I don't want to say this be insensitive, but I'm guessing, these victims, there's nothing they could have done.
Well,
Like,
I
they
think.
didn't do anything wrong.
Oh,
in this
no,
instance.
absolutely, and we never get into victim blaming at all. And in fact, these victims I want to laud for the fact that, A, they had the presence of mind to do some really dynamic decision-making. They knew how to do self-survival techniques, and they had the capacity to make some incredible observation. They were phenomenal witnesses in these instances. That in and of itself should be celebrated as far as that goes. I mean, I as a cop trained to be a professional observer, I'm not sure if under stress I would have had the same level of acumen that these individuals did in dealing with these crises that were literally involving them as a subject of a crime. And so to that extent, we want to completely extol what they've done and commend them. Yeah.
So all of the incidents happened at dark besides the one in the bus, is that right?
So the one into the home would have been early morning hours. I think it's still early at 5:30, yes. And so then 7 p.m. on the bus, but the buses have interior lights. Then we also have the one at 7, mostly darker hours, yeah.
And then with the teenagers or the children.
Yes.
Do you think that their picture was like really important? Like maybe he would have still been doing crimes at this point? If
I
they had
think the
not
picture
gone.
is very important because as much as you have images, still photos, clothing descriptions, I think contextually you're constantly painting a picture with greater and greater clarity. And I think that helps become a part of that puzzle.
And I would just
Oh.
interject too, because I can see one of our detectives nodding that this was crucial. That photograph that was taken or images taken by that 11-year-old really helped the case, because I've seen the picture. It's, a close-up of this guy's face, and it's no doubt who that is, so.
The 11-year-old took the picture on the bus.
Yes, the 11-year-old,
Person.
you got, the 11-year-old knew something was kind of creepy and had been instructed by a parent that should this happen at some time, take a picture of that person who's creeping you out, and that's what she did. And so again, there's a number of things that came together to put us where we're at right now, but that was a crucial piece of evidence.
It's a little concerning. I wonder why so many people want selfies with me.
Does this suspect Louise have any previous history with Madison Police Department?
Can one of my detectives speak to that?
He has some history. I don't know if it's directly with us. I don't think that there's a significant history there. We're still looking more into that.
All right, so that's basically an open-ended question with no real sense of track record.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much for covering this, folks. We appreciate it. Thank you.